Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place you turn to when you want to go beyond the headlines and really understand complex research.
And today, we're diving into something truly fundamental. It's a shift that's, well, it's really changing how we think about mental health.
Exactly. We're moving away from this older idea of mental illness being purely, a chemical issue in the brain.
Right. Towards understanding the profound physical impact of trauma. It's not just in the mind, it's in the body.
Our source material today really zeroes in on the neuroscientists who've spearheaded this revolution. They're showing that so many conditions we label, well, they're often the direct result of trauma.
Things like chronic anger, anxiety that just won't quit, feeling numb, disconnected. These aren't just personality quirks. The science suggests they're biological echoes of past experiences.
So that's our mission for this deep dive, to unpack how traumatic experiences literally leave marks. On our minds, sure, but also on our emotions, our ability to feel joy, connect with others, even down to our biology and immune systems.
We're getting into the embodied reality of it all.
Okay, let's unpack this. And I think the place to start has to be just how incredibly common trauma actually is. It's not some rare event.
No, not at all. It's often described as a hidden epidemic, really, especially when you look at what happens within families, within homes. The Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, they've gathered data on this, and frankly, the numbers are startling.
Yeah, lay some of those out for us. What are we actually talking about here in terms of prevalence?
Okay, well, get this. The CDC data suggests about 1 in 5 Americans experience sexual molestation as a child.
1 in 5, that's huge.
It is. And think about physical abuse. About 1 in 4 Americans report being beaten by a parent, severely enough to leave a mark.
Wow.
And it extends into adult relationships, too. 1 in 3 couples, they engage in physical violence. And maybe even more insidiously, 1 in 8 people grew up witnessing their mother being beaten or hit.
So for a huge number of people, the very place that's supposed to be safe wasn't.
Exactly. Their developmental environment, their home base, was a source of terror, not security.
Yeah.
That fundamentally alters development.
There was a comparison in the source material that really hit me. It compared the danger faced by soldiers in war zones to children at home.
Yeah, that one's tough. It points out that for every American soldier deployed in a war zone, there are 10 children who are endangered in their own homes.
10 times the number. It just reframes where the biggest dangers often lie.
And it highlights a massive difference when it comes to recovery. A soldier often has a defined enemy, maybe gets to come back to a community that understands, at least somewhat.
Right, there's a context.
But if the person hurting you is your parent, your caregiver, the person you depend on for survival, the brain, the body, it just can't reconcile that. There's no escape, and the safety system itself becomes the source of threat. It's a complete breakdown.
It's easy to get lost in the scale of these numbers, so let's bring it down to the individual level. The sources talk about Tom, a Vietnam veteran.
Right, Tom's story is pretty illustrative. Outwardly, he looked like he had it all figured out.
Valedictorian, successful lawyer, married his high school sweetheart. The American dream, almost.
Almost. But inside, he described himself as feeling dead inside, completely hollow.
And his symptoms really show how trauma lives in the body, don't they?
Absolutely. His success was almost like this rigid container holding back chaos. His nervous system was basically stuck on high alert decades after Vietnam.
Things like fireworks, summer heat.
Even dense trees, anything that reminded him sensorially of the jungle. It was unbearable. He couldn't tolerate it.
So he had to avoid it all, spending holidays alone in his office drinking, just to cope.
Exactly. Avoidance is a classic symptom, and that internal agitation, it didn't just stay inside. It spilled out as rage at home.
He was scared of himself around his family.
Yeah, he said he behaved like a monster with his wife and kids. He'd storm out, drink, do reckless things like speeding on his motorcycle. It's like his body was desperately trying to burn off that trapped survival energy.
But maybe the worst part for him, according to the sources, was the numbness.
The emotional numbing. That's often the most devastating symptom long term. He felt cut off, like he was behind a glass wall, watching his life but not feeling it.
Unable to feel real affection for his wife, his kids, just these flashes of rage, then intense shame.
Right. It shows how trauma severs that connection to yourself, to your own inner life, and obviously to others.
Yeah.
Purpose, joy, they just evaporate.
And we know the specific event, the sort of frozen image that haunted him.
Yes. The moment his whole platoon was wiped out in an instant. But it wasn't a story he remembered. It was fragments.
Specifically, the image of his best friend, Alex.
Face down in a rice paddy. He remembered a foot in the air, a scream, just these raw sensory snapshots. That's what kept his nervous system locked in the past. It wasn't a narrative memory, it was a physiological state. Hashtag 1.3, how trauma distorts perception and imagination.
That idea of being trapped by these fragments, it makes you wonder how trauma messes with just basic perception, how you see the world right now.
Yeah, and there's some fascinating early research on this using things like the Rorschach tests with veterans.
Yeah.
The ink blot tests.
Right, where you're supposed to see something in an ambiguous shape.
Exactly. And what they found was kind of two extremes. Some veterans would look at a neutral ink blot and immediately see their trauma.
Like projecting it onto the present.
Totally. There's an example of a vet named Bill who looked at one card and just yelled, "That's the child I saw blown up. You see the charred flesh,
Or
the blood spurting out." He wasn't just describing it, he was reliving it right there. The ink blot became the trigger.
wow, the intensity is incredible. But the other reaction was just as revealing in a different way.
It really was. Other veterans would look at the same ambiguous blot and just nothing. They'd say, "It's just ink," or they go completely blank.
So they couldn't engage their imagination, couldn't find meaning or structure.
Exactly. It suggests trauma can shut down that flexibility of mind.
Yeah.
So you either see the trauma everywhere, superimposing the past onto everything.
Or you lose the ability to play with possibilities, to imagine, to create meaning. You just replay the old horror or you shut down.
Right. You're stuck, either reliving the real or the projector's broken. There's no creative engagement with the present. To really grasp why this happens, why memory gets fragmented and perception gets warped, we need to look under the hood at the brain's wiring.
Specifically, the difference between our survival brain and our thinking brain.
Exactly. Let's call the survival part the emotional brain. This includes the really primitive parts like the reptilian brain, plus the limbic system. Its whole job is basically threat detection, survival central.
And it signals danger really physically, right? That knot in your stomach, the racing heart.
Precisely. It sends out hormonal alerts, these chemical squirts that create those visceral sensations. Panic, dread, that feeling of needing to run. It's designed to be fast and automatic.
But normally, our brain takes all the incoming information, sights, sounds, feelings, and weaves it together.
Right, that integration usually happens in the thalamus. You can think of the thalamus as like the brain's central chef, or maybe air traffic control. It takes all the sensory ingredients coming in.
Sight, sound, smell, touch.
Yeah, all of it. And it normally blends them into a coherent story, an autobiographical soup. It tells you, okay, this is what's happening to me right now. It gives context.
And the neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux mapped out two main routes for this information.
Yes, the famous high road and low road. The low road is like the emergency escape route. It's super fast, bypasses conscious thought, goes straight to the amygdala, the brain's smoke detector, or alarm bell.
That's your instant flinch, your jump scare reaction.
Exactly. Pure, fast reaction.
Yeah.
Then there's the high road. This one takes a bit longer, goes up through the thalamus to the frontal lobes, the thinking part of the brain.
Where we get logic, conscious awareness, planning, or response.
Right. It allows for context, analysis, a measured reaction. But here's the crucial part.
What trauma does to this system.
What's fascinating here is, if the threat is too intense, too sudden, inescapable, the thalamus gets overwhelmed. It can't cook the soup. It can't integrate the experience.
So the integration process just shuts down.
Pretty much. Instead of a coherent memory, a story with a beginning, middle, and end, you get these raw, unprocessed fragments.
The sight, the sound, the smell, the feeling.
Yeah, encoded as separate pieces, stored mainly in the emotional brain, the amygdala. They're dissociated, disconnected from context, disconnected from time. The thinking brain, the frontal lobe, never got the chance to label it as over, as past.
So it feels like it's always happening right now.
Exactly. That's the terrifying immediacy of a flashback. It's not a memory, it's a sensory replay. Hashtag 2.2, the body's stress overload.
And this breakdown in the brain has huge knock-on effects for the body's chemistry, like stress hormones.
Oh, absolutely. Normally, when you face a threat, your body floods with adrenaline, cortisol, gets you ready to fight or flee.
But once the danger passes, those levels are supposed to come back down, right? The system resets.
Ideally, yes. But in people with PTSD, that off switch is faulty. The alarm bells just keep ringing softly or sometimes loudly in the background.
So their stress hormones stay elevated.
They take much, much longer to return to baseline. and they spike really high and fast in response to things that wouldn't bother someone else. A car backfiring, someone raising their voice.
This system is just primed for danger constantly.
Constantly mobilizing resources, pumping out stress chemicals. And living like that, constantly bathing your organs and brain in stress hormones, is exhausting and damaging.
What does that lead to long term?
The insidious effects are things like chronic memory problems, difficulty concentrating, constant irritability, terrible sleep. And down the line, it contributes to all sorts of physical health issues. Heart problems, autoimmune issues. It wears the body down.
It's physically costly to be in that state all the time.
Immensely costly. And this explains why traumatic memories are so different from ordinary, even painful memories.
How so?
Well, there was that study, the GRAND study, following WWII events for decades. It showed that even horrible combat memories tend to soften over time. People revise them, integrate them, find meaning. The brain sort of bleaches the horror, as they put it.
Makes sense. You process it.
But with PTSD, the traumatic memories often stay frozen, intact. They resist that revision process because they weren't properly encoded by the thinking brain in the first place.
They remain these raw sensory fragments.
Exactly, like the example of Julian in the source material. He couldn't tell you the story of what happened. He just had these flashes, an outstretched arm, the wood grain on a church pew, a specific feeling of panic. No narrative, just the raw data held in the emotional brain. Hashtag 2.3, the vagus nerve and social safety.
Okay, so the brain's stuck in threat mode, the body's flooded with stress hormones. How does this impact our ability to connect with other people, to feel safe around them?
Now we need to talk about the vagus nerve. It's a huge player here. It's the 10th cranial nerve, sometimes called the wandering nerve, because it connects the brainstem all the way down to our major organs, heart, lungs, gut.
And it's key for social stuff.
It's absolutely central to our ability to socially engage. There are different branches, but let's focus on two main ones relevant to trauma. First, there's the ventral vagal complex, the VVC.
Okay, VVC, what does that do?
Think of the VVC as your social engagement system. When it's active, it means you feel safe. It acts like a brake on your heart rate, slows it down, it helps you breathe deeper, it allows for connection.
Like making eye contact, smiling, feeling calm with someone.
Exactly. That feeling of being centered, maybe pleasantly interested or aroused in a social setting.
Yeah.
That's your VVC online. It's the biological foundation for feeling safe with others.
So what happens with trauma? It breaks the system.
It can, yeah. Especially in situations where you feel trapped, immobilized, you can't fight, you can't flee. Think of a terrified child being hurt or seeing a buddy trapped under fire.
When there's no escape.
Right. In those moments of inescapable terror, another, much older branch of the vagus nerve takes over. The dorsal vagal complex, or DVC.
Okay, DVC. What's its function?
The DVC is the shutdown response. It's the oldest, most primitive survival strategy. It causes your heart rate to plummet, your breathing becomes shallow, you might feel dizzy, or even faint.
Like playing dead.
Essentially, yes. It leads to dissociation, that feeling of being outside your body, numb, collapsed, that zombie-like state. It's the system's last resort when active defense fails.
Wow. So trauma survivors might be flipping between high alert and complete shutdown.
Precisely. They get stuck oscillating between hyperarousal, the fight-flight panic, and hyperarousal, the DVC shutdown, the numbness, the collapse. And that brings us to neuroception.
Neuroception. What's that?
It's our nervous system's ability to constantly scan the environment unconsciously for cues of safety or danger before conscious thought kicks in.
Like a background radar.
Exactly. And trauma fundamentally screws up that radar. The traumatized nervous system defaults to seeing danger everywhere, even when things are objectively safe. The VVC, the safety system, stays offline, making genuine connection and relaxation feel almost impossible. The world just feels dangerous all the time.
This takes on a whole different dimension when the trauma happens early in life, during childhood development.
Oh, absolutely. That's where attachment theory comes in, pioneered by John Bowlby. He talked about the need for a secure base.
Meaning a reliable, loving caregiver.
Right. Someone consistent who provides safety and comfort. That secure base is what allows a child to explore the world confidently, learn empathy, figure out how to manage their impulses. Trauma undermines all of that.
You can almost see that secure base being built in real time when you watch a parent and infant interacting well, that back and forth.
Yeah, that spontaneous dance of attunement, as Daniel Stern called it. It's this beautiful synchrony, the mirroring, the shared smiles.
But it's not always perfect, right? There are mismatches.
Crucially, yes. It's not about perfection. It's about the rupture and repair. The baby pulls hair, the mom yelps, the baby gets scared, The mom quickly repairs it, maybe with a tickle, a soothing voice.
So the child learns that relationships can handle conflict. That connection can be restored after a break.
Exactly. They learn that intense feelings are survivable and that others can help them regulate. But what if that repair doesn't happen? What if the caregiver is consistently misattuned, neglectful, or frightening?
Winnicott called it the lack of a good enough mother.
Right. If the caregiver consistently fails to tune in or responds inappropriately, the child starts to distrust their own inner world, their feelings, their sensations. They don't get validated, or worse, they're punished.
So they learn to ignore their own body signals.
They have to. To survive, they might become hyper-focused on the caregiver's state, trying to anticipate their needs or moods, essentially becoming the mother's idea of what the baby is.
Losing touch with their own internal compass.
Precisely. They shut down that crucial feedback from the body, the very source of knowing what feels good, what feels bad, what you want, what gives you purpose. It's a profound loss of self.
In the scale of this, there was that finding from interviews with patients about feeling safe growing up.
Yeah, that was genuinely shocking to the researchers. They asked patients, was there anyone you felt safe with as a child?
And the results.
1 out of 4 patients, 25%, couldn't name a single person. They just checked nobody on the forms.
Nobody. Imagine going through childhood without that fundamental feeling of safety with another human being.
The implications for brain development, for the nervous system, for the ability to trust, they're just staggering. You're basically navigating the world without the biological foundation for a connection. Hashtag 3.2, the self goes offline.
And the neuroscience backs this up in a really dramatic way, showing how the sense of self can literally go offline in people with chronic early trauma.
It does. The source material talks about brain imaging studies looking at what they call the mohawk of self-awareness.
Okay, the mohawk. What parts of the brain are we talking about?
It's a network along the midline of the brain, including areas like the medial prefrontal cortex, MPFC, and the insula. These are key regions for interoception, sensing your internal bodily states, and for self-reflection.
So, knowing if you're hungry, tired, anxious, and relating external events back to yourself, how does this affect me?
Exactly. It's your internal monitoring system, your feeling of being you. In healthy people, these areas light up when they think about themselves or tune into their bodies.
But in the scans of adults who had severe childhood trauma,
It was the opposite. Almost no activation in these cell-sensing regions. Eerily quiet.
wow. So what does that mean clinically? How does that show up in their lives?
It shows up as that profound loss of purpose and direction we talked about. How can you know what you want, what you need, what path to take if you can't feel your internal signals? Decision-making becomes incredibly hard.
Because you don't have access to that gut feeling, that inner knowing.
Right. The proto-self, the very foundation of emotion and motivation, is offline. You can't register what your body is telling you, so you feel lost, adrift.
And this internal shutdown affects how they interact with the outside world too, right? There was that experiment with the video.
Oh yeah, the Richard Gere lookalike experiment. They showed participants a video of a friendly-looking face making direct eye contact.
What happened in the brains of typical participants?
Their prefrontal cortex lit up the thinking brain, assessing the social cue, maybe feeling curious or cautious engagement.
But the trauma survivors.
Their prefrontal cortex stayed quiet. Instead, they got intense activation deep in the primitive brainstem, specifically an area called the periaqueductal gray, or PEG.
And the PEG is involved in?
Basic, raw survival responses. Startle, freezing, cowering, defensive aggression.
So a simple friendly face making eye contact triggered a primal threat response.
Exactly. Their system bypassed social assessment entirely and went straight into survival mode. No curiosity, no engagement, just danger. It shows how deeply trauma rewires even basic social perception. Hashtag 3.3, the struggle for diagnosis.
Given all this, the fragmentation, the dysregulation, the loss of self, it makes sense that clinicians started feeling like the existing diagnostic labels weren't cutting it for these kids.
Absolutely. This led to the push for a new diagnosis, developmental trauma disorder, or DTD.
Why was that needed? What were the existing labels missing?
The problem was, and still is, that kids with complex trauma histories often end up collecting a whole bunch of different diagnoses: ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder, bipolar, anxiety, depression.
Like treating symptoms in isolation.
Exactly. It obscures the common root, the pervasive impact of chronic interpersonal trauma and neglect on their development. DTD was proposed to capture that cohesive picture.
But the American Psychiatric Association, the APA, didn't adopt it in the DSM-5 back in 2011. Why not?
Well, it's complicated. Part of it was institutional inertia, the difficulty of adding major new categories. Some argued it overlapped too much with diagnoses like borderline personality disorder.
Even though DTD specifically focuses on trauma's impact during development.
Right. The argument from proponents was that labels like BPD don't fully capture the developmental derailment caused by early trauma. Without DTD, they argue, we keep missing the underlying cause and just manage surface behaviors.
And what are the core features that DTD was trying to capture?
Pervasive problems with regulation, emotional, behavioral, physiological, difficulty with attention and concentration, and significant struggles in relationships, both with others and with themselves.
And the behavioral dysregulation can look pretty extreme.
It can. We see things like intense mood swings, sleep problems, but also really maladaptive coping mechanisms. Compulsive rocking, maybe compulsive masturbation, risky behavior.
It's self-harm.
Yes, tragically common. Cutting, burning, biting themselves. These are often desperate nonverbal attempts to either feel something when numb or to discharge overwhelming internal tension when self-regulation fails completely.
The case of Aisha, the teenage girl in the source, really illustrates this. Her behavior, running away, high-risk sex, getting gang raped, it just doesn't make sense if you only label it depression.
Exactly. But if you see it through the lens of DTD, of a system completely dysregulated by early abuse, her biological clock is sped up, her ability to assess risk is shot, she can't articulate her needs or protect herself.
She's living in this world of pure action and impulse without that internal guidance system.
Right. Her body's acting out the trauma, the lack of safety, the inability to set boundaries, because the pathways for conscious self-protection were never properly formed.
Okay, so we've established trauma lives deep in the emotional brain and the body's physiology. This explains why just talking about it, using pure logic, the top-down approach often isn't enough, or can even be counterproductive.
Right. If recalling that trauma shuts down the frontal lobe, the thinking brain, then simply asking someone to analyze it rationally isn't going to work very well. You need to address the underlying physiological state first.
So the focus shifts to what the source calls limbic system therapy. What's the main goal there?
It's fundamentally about restoring balance, helping the emotional brain and the rational brain communicate effectively again. The aim is to help the person stay within their window of tolerance.
Let's unpack that term, window of tolerance.
Okay, think of it as the optimal zone of arousal. When you're in the window, you can think clearly, feel emotions without being overwhelmed, learn new things, connect with others. You're functioning well.
But trauma pushes you outside that window.
Exactly. You get pushed either into hyperarousal, that's the fight or flight zone, feeling anxious, angry, overwhelmed, disorganized.
Yeah.
Or you fall into hyperarousal, the shutdown zone, feeling numb, empty, depressed, disconnected.
So limbic therapy tries to widen that window, make it more stable.
Precisely. It uses techniques, often starting from the bottom up, focusing on the body and sensations, to help regulate the nervous system. The goal is to bring the emotional brain back to its proper job, which is managing the body's background functions, instead of constantly sounding the alarm.
So what are some of these bottom-up or body-focused approaches? EMDR comes up a lot. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Yes, EMDR has become a really important tool. Francine Shapiro, who developed it, stumbled upon the idea that bilateral stimulation, like moving your eyes back and forth, seemed to lessen the distress of disturbing thoughts.
How does it work in therapy? You recall the trauma while doing the eye movements.
Essentially, yes. The therapist guides the client to briefly access the traumatic memory, the image, the feeling, the thought, while engaging in bilateral stimulation, which could be eye movements, taps, or sounds, alternating left and right.
And the idea is this helps process the memory differently.
The hypothesis is that it mimics some aspects of REM sleep, where the brain is naturally processing experiences and linking memories. It seems to help the fragmented, emotionally charged sensory data move from the amygdala,
The alarm center.
to the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, where it can be integrated into a narrative, into a story that belongs in the past.
So it doesn't erase the memory, but it changes its quality.
Exactly. Patients often report that the memory loses its horrible immediacy. It feels more distant, less overwhelming.
Like it becomes a memory about something that happened rather than feeling like it's happening now.
Precisely. As one patient put it, before I felt each step. Now it's like a whole instead of fragments, so it's more manageable. It transforms the raw salt into a contained piece of the past.
Another fascinating approach mentioned is neurofeedback. This sounds like directly training the brain.
It is, in a way. It's about changing the brain's actual electrical activity patterns, the brain waves.
How do you know what patterns to change?
It usually starts with a key EEG, a quantitative electroencephalogram. It's like a map of the brain's electrical activity, highlighting areas that might be overactive or underactive compared to norms.
And trauma often shows specific patterns.
Yes, common patterns include things like too much slow wave activity, like theta or delta, in the frontal lobes, which is linked to poor focus and executive function, or maybe excessive high-frequency beta waves associated with anxiety and hypervigilance.
So neurofeedback tries to retrain those frequencies.
Exactly. Sensors are placed on the scalp, and the person gets real-time feedback, maybe sounds or visuals on a screen, when their brainwaves move into a more desirable pattern. The brain learns, through operant conditioning, to produce more of the healthy frequencies and less of the dysfunctional ones.
And this can work even when talk therapy is too difficult.
That's one of its strengths. The case of Lisa in the source material is powerful. She had severe dissociation, couldn't tolerate talking about her trauma.
What happened with neurofeedback?
They targeted her right temporal lobe, a key area for fear processing. She always heard this hum of low-level conversations in her head. After about 6 months of training, that specific brain area,
The hum stopped.
the hum, disappeared, and she stopped dissociating. Her own words were, "I integrated, I guess, everything just came together." It suggests the brain literally rewired itself towards coherence and safety without her having to consciously process the trauma through talking.
There were also results with veterans, right? Alpha theta training.
Yes, significant results with Vietnam vets with chronic PTSD. Alpha theta training rewards the brain for entering that twilight state between waking and sleep, a state very receptive to learning and integration. They combine this with positive imagery.
And saw real improvements.
High rates of improvement, yes. It taps into the brain's own capacity for reorganization and healing when given the right conditions. #tag 4.4 body-centered and communal healing.
So EMDR works on memory and neurofeedback on brainwaves. But the source is also stressed just getting back in touch with the body itself.
Absolutely fundamental. Recovery means feeling safe inside your own skin. That physical sense of safety has often been destroyed by trauma.
So things like massage.
Therapeutic massage, yes, or movement practices like Feldenkrais, Tai Chi, Qigong. Anything that promotes mindful awareness of bodily sensations in a safe context. Touch is the most basic way we have of calming distress, activating that VVC safety system.
And even simpler than that, breathing.
The simplest and most powerful tool we all have. Just consciously slowing down your breath, especially making the exhalation longer than the inhalation.
That directly stimulates the vagus nerve, right? The parasympathetic system.
Exactly. It's like manually applying the brake to the nervous system's arousal. You're telling your body, okay, the danger has passed, you can calm down.
And the research backs this up. Yoga for PTSD.
Yes, a study showed just 10 weeks of regular yoga practice led to significant reductions in PTSD symptoms, even in people who hadn't responded well to other treatments. It combines breath work, mindful movement, and body awareness.
Then there's the communal aspect. Healing not just individually, but together.
So important. Humans are social creatures. We regulate each other's nervous systems. Synchronized activity is powerful. Think military drills, choirs, dancing.
That idea of muscular bonding.
Exactly. Moving together creates a visceral sense of connection and belonging. This is used in therapeutic settings too, like theater programs.
Like urban improv, using mirroring exercises.
Right. Having traumatized adolescents who often feel totally out of sync mirror each other's movements. It forces them to attune physically, non-verbally.
And the source mentions laughter during these.
Yes, the giggles aren't trivial. They're a physiological sign that the VVC, the social safety system, is coming back online. It signals relaxation and connection.
And theater also gives a sense of agency.
Crucially, yes. For kids from chaotic, unpredictable homes, participating in a play provides structure, cause, and effect. They get to embody different roles, experience emotions safely, and feel a sense of control over an outcome.
Like Larry, the veteran playing Brutus.
Yeah, a man with dozens of hospitalizations, finding profound healing by embodying the agency and conflict of a Shakespearean character. He was processing trauma through action and narrative, perhaps without ever needing to label it as such. #OutUTRO.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, what all this research points to is that we can't effectively heal trauma by just treating symptoms in isolation. We have to understand its deep roots in our biology, in our nervous system, and in our social connections.
Right. The big takeaway for you, the listener, is that trauma literally changes the brain and body. It impairs self-regulation, connection, even your sense of self. And this is the hopeful part.
There's real hope. We have
Yeah.
these evidence-based approaches, EMDR, neurofeedback, body-based therapies, communal practices that can actually help rewire those affected brain circuits. They can bring those areas back online.
Healing is possible.
Mm.
Integration is possible.
It is. But knowing this individually isn't enough. There's a societal responsibility here. Understanding the biology of trauma forces us to look at prevention and support systems.
Especially for children. Absolutely. Things like high-quality early childhood education, support for new parents, home visitation programs like they have in some other countries. These aren't just nice-to-haves. They're essential for building secure attachments and resilient nervous systems from the start. They are a biological necessity.
And there's an economic argument, too, isn't there? Investing early saves money later.
Hugely. The estimate mentioned is that every dollar invested in good early childhood programs saves about $7 down the road.
How does that saving happen?
Fewer costs related to juvenile delinquency, special education, chronic health problems, incarceration, unemployment. You pay for the consequences of trauma one way or another. Prevention is simply far cheaper and obviously far more humane.
So, as a society, we have this choice. We can keep cutting things like school recess, gym classes, arts programs, things that actually promote regulation and joyful engagement.
Or we can actually follow the science. We can acknowledge that trauma is arguably our biggest public health issue and start investing seriously in creating safe and supportive environments, especially for kids.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought from the source material. It contrasts incarceration rates.
Yeah. The U.S. locks up about 781 people per 100,000. Compare that to a country like Norway, which invests heavily in safe childhoods and social support. Their rate is around 71 per 100,000.
A tenfold difference.
Massive. So the question to leave you with is, what could happen in our society if we truly absorb the lesson that the body keeps the score? What if we shifted resources towards building that foundation of safety and connection early on based on this understanding? What might change?
Something powerful to consider. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.